Has this been the week that fundamentally changed everything for the Prime Minister? We've witnessed not just one seismic policy reversal, but multiple U-turns that have left many questioning whether Keir Starmer still possesses the authority necessary to govern effectively. Despite securing what appeared to be a commanding victory just 11 months ago, this administration is struggling to maintain control over its own agenda and party members. The numbers behind Labour's electoral success tell a fascinating story that reveals the fragility beneath the surface. While Starmer consistently references his impressive 174-seat majority when defending his mandate, he rarely mentions the remarkably narrow vote share that delivered this parliamentary dominance. Labour secured victory with barely 33% of the popular vote, marking the smallest winning percentage for any majority government in Britain's post-war era. This statistical anomaly helps explain why the current government feels so precarious despite its substantial parliamentary numbers. The broad majority built on such shallow foundations has proven vulnerable to internal pressures that would typically be manageable for a more securely positioned administration. When your electoral coalition is held together by tactical voting, rather than genuine enthusiasm, maintaining party discipline becomes exponentially more challenging. The latest crisis emerged when more than 120 Labour MPs supported what parliamentary procedure calls a reasoned amendment to the disability benefits legislation. This wasn't simply an attempt to modify specific provisions within the bill. A reasoned amendment represents the nuclear option in parliamentary warfare, designed to completely destroy the proposed legislation and force the government back to the drawing board. The scale of this rebellion forced Downing Street into desperate damage control mode over the past 48 hours. Government whips worked frantically to prevent what could have been a career-ending defeat for the Prime Minister. The sight of so many government MPs willing to openly defy their own leadership sent shockwaves through Westminster and raised fundamental questions about Starmer's grip on power. This revolt comes during an already turbulent period marked by a series of embarrassing policy reversals. The winter fuel allowance controversy saw the government retreating from its initial position after sustained pressure from backbench MPs and public criticism. Similarly, the grooming gangs inquiry saga demonstrated the administration's tendency to make bold pronouncements only to reverse course when faced with determined opposition. The current benefits crisis centers on the government's attempt to reduce spending growth by £5 billion according to Institute for Fiscal Studies projections. The partial U-turn announced following the backbench rebellion will eliminate £3 billion from those hoped-for savings, leaving Chancellor Rachel Reeves scrambling to identify alternative revenue sources or spending reductions. Given the parliamentary rebellions we've witnessed, finding additional spending cuts seems increasingly unlikely. This mathematical reality points toward only one viable solution: higher taxes. The prospect of tax increases will hardly improve the government's already dire polling position or strengthen Starmer's authority, with nervous backbench MPs facing electoral pressure in their constituencies. The policy reversals extend beyond mere legislative defeats into the realm of political rhetoric and messaging. In a recent Observer interview intended to celebrate his first year in office, Starmer performed another remarkable U-turn by expressing deep regret over his islands of strangers speech delivered just 1 month earlier. That speech, which warned against Britain becoming a place where different communities live parallel lives without integration, drew fierce criticism from within his own party. Some backbench MPs compared the rhetoric to Enoch Powell's divisive language, while others went further by characterizing it as fascistic in tone. The fact that a prime minister feels compelled to apologize for advocating social integration speaks volumes about the current power dynamics within the Labour Party. If you're finding this political analysis valuable, make sure to subscribe to stay informed about these rapidly developing situations that could reshape British politics. Behind these public struggles lies a fascinating power dynamic within Downing Street itself. Morgan McSweeney, the architect of Labour's election strategy, assumed the role of Chief of Staff after orchestrating Sue Gray's departure around Christmas. Since taking control, McSweeney has been credited with driving the government's strategic direction on everything from military spending increases to tougher rhetoric on immigration enforcement. However, The Prime Minister's public distancing from his own islands of strangers speech suggests significant tension between these two key figures. While Starmer didn't personally write those words, his speechwriters would have crafted them, under McSweeney's considerable influence. The public expression of regret represents either a breakdown in their working relationship or a calculated attempt to shift responsibility for unpopular messaging. Recent reporting by respected Times journalists Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogrund has shed fascinating light on these internal dynamics. Their analysis suggests that McSweeney and a small circle of advisors have effectively convinced Starmer that he's directing government strategy while actually maintaining control themselves. The most striking metaphor from their reporting compares the Prime Minister to a passenger on the Docklands Light Railway, London's automated train system. Just as DLR passengers sit in the front car, believing they're driving, while the computer actually controls everything, Starmer may think he's steering the government while others pull the strings behind the scenes. This extraordinary situation has created what feels like a hung parliament despite Labour's commanding 174-seat majority. The inability to pass relatively modest policy reforms to address ballooning benefit costs demonstrates a shocking absence of effective authority. Previous prime ministers have faced similar moments when backbench rebellions and policy U-turns signaled the beginning of their political decline. Theresa May's authority never recovered from parliamentary defeats over Brexit policy. Boris Johnson's final months were characterized by the same pattern of U-turns and rebellions that we're witnessing today. MPs grew tired of defending positions that changed within hours, creating resentment that ultimately proved terminal for both leaders. Labour backbenchers have already experienced this humiliation multiple times. They defended winter fuel payment cuts to pensioners before the policy was modified. They supported the Prime Minister's integration rhetoric before he disavowed it. They argued against grooming gang inquiries before the government commissioned one anyway. This pattern breeds the toxic combination of bad blood, resentment, and diminished authority that makes effective governance nearly impossible. Why should MPs defend next week's announcement when it might be reversed the following week? This erosion of trust and credibility creates a vicious cycle that becomes increasingly difficult to break. As Institute for Fiscal Studies Director Paul Johnson observed, if the government cannot even slow the rate at which benefits spending increases, how can it possibly make the broader fiscal adjustments necessary for economic stability? The benefits bill is projected to grow by £13 billion by 2030, and the government merely wanted to reduce that increase by £5 billion. This failure to achieve even modest spending restraint puts the administration on a collision course with fiscal reality. Unable to make necessary spending cuts and facing backbench resistance to tax increases, the government finds itself trapped between competing pressures with no easy escape route. Before we conclude, remember to subscribe for continued coverage of this developing political crisis and its implications for Britain's future. The polling data reflects this governing crisis starkly. Labour has lost 20 points since the election, representing perhaps the fastest decline in popularity for any newly elected government in modern British history. This unprecedented collapse in public support after just 11 months raises serious questions about the administration's long-term viability. Political speculation naturally turns to potential leadership challenges as these crises multiply. Angela Rayner has long harbored leadership ambitions, while figures like Ed Miliband and Wes Streeting are mentioned as possible alternatives. Whether these represent genuine threats or journalistic speculation remains unclear, but the mere existence of such conversations indicates the gravity of Starmer's position. With summer recess approaching and party conference season looming in September and October, the coming months will prove crucial for this government's survival. The question isn't whether more challenges will emerge, but whether this administration can stabilize itself before the cascading series of U-turns becomes irreversible. The ultimate test will be whether Keir Starmer can restore his authority over both policy and party, or whether we're witnessing the beginning of another prime ministerial collapse that will reshape British politics once again.